This is the Ramesseum, obviously named after Ramses. This is where you get the sense of scale, though. An important point that Stephen Mailer pointed out is if you look at the carvings on the left, they're different from the carvings on the right. Carvings on the left may be older. The carvings on the right are deeper, and they were most likely done for Ramses because there was a tendency during certain periods to deface the names of older so-called pharaohs. And so Ramses wanted to make sure, or his priest maybe wanted to make sure, that his name and all the writings about him were kept almost forever, and it would be very difficult to deface something that was so deeply cut into the stone like this. Now, we don't see so far any sign of lost ancient technology or super ancient work. This is all limestone, and again, according to Stephen and others, limestone was the preferred material afterwards because limestone was softer. You could work it with bronze chisels and stone hammers, but when it comes to carvings or buildings which were made of granite, basalt, or quartz, calcite, that requires tools that are harder than bronze. The question is, what tools were they? In the archaeological record, there are no tools, as far as I know, other than bronze chisels and stone hammers. So the harder stone is hinting at us that that work that was done is older than the pharaonic dynastic Egyptians. And like at any ancient site, you see different time periods existing. This, according to Yusuf Awiyan, is dynastic period. Again, they were working with limestone. Limestone is not very hard, so they could work it with bronze chisels and stone hammers. But these sculptures are granite. Granite is much harder, could not be properly shaped, especially not fine detail, with bronze chisels, stone hammers, and sandpaper. And possibly even more curious are the presence of the keystone cuts, which we find in different parts of the world, but they're most famous here and also in Peru and Bolivia. Keystone cuts for bronze or some kind of metal would be put in there supposedly to hold the stones together. But what you'll notice about these ones is you can see the tools that were used, chisels. So these are not especially sophisticated examples of them, but they're present nonetheless. So in terms of a sense of scale, again, this is the statue, or part of the statue. This is part of his head and his ear, and then coming down that way, his shoulder. 1,000 tons finished, one block of stone. Originally, of course, it would have been much more than 1,000 tons because it would have been a rough piece to start with.
Put your back into it. Stop knocking around.
Wow. And here you can see after it fell, as the result of an earthquake supposedly, somebody came along, and this is his head, and attempted to separate a section as building material, and of course they gave up because this is rose granite, super hard stone. So here's the bottom of part of the 1,000 ton statue, and I believe this is the base on which he stood, and just the size of his feet. Here's my hand in comparison. Or 1 foot compared to a foot. My foot's about the size of his toenail. So again, finished at 1,000 tons. So how did they move it 500 miles from the quarry at Aswan? Most, if not all, of the rose granite came from the Aswan quarry. And so how was it moved? How do you move 1,000 tons? You're not obviously going to move it on rollers across a desert. You're not going to be able to build a reed boat big enough, strong enough to be able to carry a finished sculpture at 1,000 tons. And if it was brought here raw, as a raw blank stone prior to carving, then you're talking at least 1,200 tons, or maybe 1,300 tons. How would they have moved it? So here's the bottom of part of the 1,000 ton statue, and I believe this is the base on which he stood, and just the size of his feet. Here's my hand in comparison. Or 1 foot compared to a foot. My foot's about the size of his toenail. So again, finished at 1,000 tons. So how did they move it 500 miles from the quarry at Aswan? Most, if not all, of the rose granite came from the Aswan quarry. And so how was it moved? How do you move 1,000 tons? You're not obviously going to move it on rollers across a desert. You're not going to be able to build a reed boat big enough, strong enough to be able to carry a finished sculpture at 1,000 tons. And if it was brought here raw, as a raw blank stone prior to carving, then you're talking at least 1,200 tons, or maybe 1,300 tons. How would they have moved it? Another point to take into account here at the Ramesseum is here we have limestone, which is not a particularly hard stone, but these columns, as vast as they are, at least 20 feet high, you clearly see that they were done in sections, because you can see the seam as we go down where the fill-in repair work is. So during dynastic times, when this was built, they were working with limestone and working it in sections. But as we go farther back in time, to the pre-dynastic period, when they're working with granite, diorite, and basalt, quite often that's megalithic. That's a single block of stone, sometimes a single column, a single header piece of stone of larger scale. So it's not simply the hardness of the stone that was used prior to dynastic times, but it's the size of the stone as well. And the question is, how did they move this stuff? Slaves? No. These are the colossi of Memnon. They are at least 30 feet tall, and originally were one piece of stone. This was one solid block of rock on top of a monster's base. Now the thing is that just because there are hieroglyphics on them, it doesn't necessarily mean that the hieroglyphics were done at the same time that the carving, shaping of these massive sculptures were done. So to date, the colossi based upon the hieroglyphics that are on them could be very well an erroneous thing. I think they're far older. I think these are from the pre-dynastic Commission period, and God knows how they moved the damn things. Hundreds of tons, if not more, but I'll have to find out exactly how much they originally weighed. So you're looking at Luxor Temple, or a very small part of it here. The sound in the background is a mosque. And this is one of the faces reputed to be Ramses II that engineer Chris Dunn believes was done with ancient high technology, because he's found what he believes are machine tool marks inside the nostrils and cutters. He's found the actual machine tool marks on the face, because the precision of this sculpture is so fine that one side is a mirror image of the other side. And right next to this head of Ramses is an incredible obelisk. It's at least 8 feet on one side at the base, and I have no idea, it's got to be 60 feet tall. Made of rose granite, brought from the quarry at Aswan. So these rose granite sculptures, which have to be 15 feet tall, that cartouche here was added later. The name of Ramses was put that after. So it's likely that this does not, the sculpture does not represent Ramses. It could be a lot older. And what Yusuf Awiyan pointed out, because the first one has the cartouche there, the second one has the cartouche there, the third one doesn't. So you see, there's the cartouche with his name on it. Next to it is a dagger, but here the dagger's in the way of where it would be. So that's another sign of the great possibility that the hieroglyph does not name the original sculpture itself, but was added afterwards, and possibly long after the carving was done. Copper chisels and stone hammers cannot achieve this work.